Oh my god. That is right. Another NAS solution that premiered on crowdfunding has seemingly kind of or sort of bit the bullet, leaving a lot of people out of pocket. This is about a few things today. We're going to be talking predominantly about the OpnNAS or OpnNAS, a device that we talked about in spring last year. But on top of that, we're going to talk about the subject of crowdfunding once again. It's something we've talked about on the channel a few times, and I do think we are worryingly tippy-toeing into where people are taking for granted that a lot of bigger players enter on the crowdfunding scene, and unfortunately not treating crowdfunding websites like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Crowdsupply and more like what they are. They are not traditional retail, something we've covered in numerous videos. Now, before we get into this, let's face it, a number of you are almost certainly going to take to the comments and say, Robbie, it's YouTube knobbers like you that are legitimizing solutions like this.
Move this man!
I am going to respectfully disagree. I do think we do talk about solutions on this channel, and other people talk about them on theirs, solutions that come from traditional retail backgrounds, established brands and more, where we talk about a solution and eventually it takes to retail. Now, when we do talk about crowdfunding products like the OpnNAS, like Ugreen's NAS, like the ZLab series, like numerous NAS solutions here on the channel, we always make sure at the beginning, the middle and the end to highlight that this is crowdfunding, that this is not traditional retail. And almost certainly these are solutions that will make their way to traditional retail, and frankly you should wait it out if you aren't happy with the risk. Still, nonetheless, that risk is there, and that is what returns us to the OpnNAS solution. Now, when this launched, it was an absolute beast of a system. It was covered here. I think the only other channels that I could find that talked about this were Apparel's Adventure and Technically Unsure. I think there's a few other news reports floating around, but at least on YouTube, these ones alongside myself were the people that received a unit. Now, again, it was a real device, and indeed when you look at my original video and some of the coverage that I made, I reached out to the brand with several questions regarding how they were getting some of the components. Is it actually Canada made and more? And the creator Eric responded and answered a lot of my questions, and I was getting prepared to do a follow-up video in conjunction with some footage and testing that they'd already been conducting on their side to talk about the capabilities of this system, because frankly I wasn't able to emulate some of the higher end stuff that this system could do. Now, this kind of fell down the cracks between other projects, and over time, because the campaign ended and then they went into the distribution, I decided to hold off on anything like that until the device was eventually going to hit full retail. And that's where things kind of went awry. When you go to the listing there on Indiegogo, you find several things. And again, I'm going to quickly summarize this. Number one, the campaign creator highlighted several incidents that was happening with the Canadian postal strikes, and availability of certain components almost certainly pointed at with regard to tariffs and availability. Now, that's neither here nor there. Let's be realistic. You have paid, or at least paid money to back a product, and therefore later on delays. Some people go, well, this is just a matter of course of crowdfunding, and others will again treat this like traditional retail and say, no, I put money down, where's my thing? And I think they have a right to say that. However, towards the end of 2025, the cracks were really starting to show. A few people got in touch with me with regards to them not receiving their unit. One user in particular, hopefully you can see it on screen, was raising several questions with Eric and comments there on the thread with regards to the availability of those products and the fact they were Canada based. Now, following up from that in updates, we can see, at least going by the updates that are on there and the comments on the pages, that people that were based in Canada and people that were based in elements of America, it seems like those users got their units. However, outside of that, it does look like lots of other users have not received it. Now, we should attack that term lots, and we will circle back to this later on, but the campaign wasn't actually that big in relative terms to other NAS campaigns that we've talked about that have broke 6 and 7 figures. This raised a little in excess of $39,000, and that was with 28 backers, which again, in the grand scheme of things, is not that many, and we will circle back to Storaxa, by the way. The result is that the amount of money actually lost on this comparative to other campaigns isn't that big. But let's face it, because this is such a hefty beast of a unit, the actual money lost per user hasn't yet received their goods, because fingers crossed, you never know. Eric may still deliver on this. Let's face it, that is a lot of money to each of those individual users. In the case of the Storaxa campaign, for example, a lot of users were losing 3-figure sums. This is a lot of 4-figure sums, feeling like it's gone down the toilet. Now, the reason for this video is fast forward to January 2025, and users that are still yet to receive their unit got in touch to say that although some people have received theirs, they hadn't. And the initial user that I spoke to back in the closing stages of 2025 actually continued to comment on that thread for other users. Frankly, that's really nice of him. He could have easily just cut and run. He got his device. So fair play to him. But I reached out to Eric as well. And although Eric responded to my emails back at the end of 2025 about those delays, there's been no response. I gave him a few days to give a suitable response for this video, but unfortunately at the time of recording, I have yet to have one. If he has, I'll insert it here in the video. Let's see if he has. Now, I may be unpopular when I say this, but I wouldn't class this as a scam the way I class Storaxa as a scam. The reason being, the more you read into the later updates, the more you read into the comment, it does seem that this was simply a case of mismanagement, or at the very least, underestimating some of the complexity and the potential costs. Now, again, the amount of money that was raised, realistically, was never going to facilitate a campaign like this. There wasn't a lot of overhead there. I do think that perhaps if it had been a larger campaign with a little bit more of a buffer zone, we may be telling a different story. But again, this is complete theoretical stuff on my part. Nevertheless, in the closing stage of the campaign, lots of users are saying about they're not getting any responses from Eric anymore. Lots of users are outside of their credit card chargeback, and we'll come back around to that in a moment. But on top of that, people highlighting getting AI responses with the original AI prompt attached there. Other users that, again, similarly getting the same response or copied and pasted responses. And ultimately, this does feel like someone that may be ghosting. Again, hope beyond hope. Maybe things will get delivered. Maybe Eric will be able to source additional funding. But statements such as devices going outside of the US and Canada, stating from Eric that he's asking users for a further $450 in order to pay for the additional shipping costs, and that those costs may also still be liable for import fees for those outside of Canada and the US. All are adding up to almost certainly a lot of these users not getting their bunts back and not even getting a unit for the pleasure, not even a bad unit. But as mentioned in the introduction, this isn't what this video is only about. We've got to talk about people using crowdfunding to buy a NAS and save themselves a bit of bunts, because there are signs, there are clues. When we looked at that Storaxa campaign a few years ago, one of the main reasons that we had concerns about it was the fact that it almost had no margin for failure. It was too cheap. And we ended up back in the campaign more than anything to kind of see if it was going to be a success or a failure and documenting it long term. Unfortunately, some of the lessons that came from that are seemingly not stuck around. So let's talk about if you are going to back a campaign. And by the way, everything I'm going to say to you right now applies to, I don't care if it's a Ugreen established, well-known brand that you have heard of that is running a campaign, or a Z Labs that you have never heard of, because realistically, the rules remain the same. Number one, if you are going to back a campaign, look at how much you could stand to lose, not how much you stand to save. It's really important. Crowdfunding and early access backing is cheap for a reason. I think a lot of users have lost sight of that. Yes, you can be funding an idea. Yes, you can be funding a great objective, and that is a nice feel-good feeling. But don't think it's cheap for the sake of cheapness. It is almost certainly cheap for a reason, and part of that reason is risk. It is not traditional retail. Your consumer rights are vastly different in crowdfunding than they are with over-the-counter purchases. Another little hint, if you're not going to look at the cheapness and the low price entry point to get hold of an item, look at the goal amount. And we'll circle back round to how that differentiates between different platforms, but look at the goal amount there. If you see a product down on crowdfunding, and it is some $1,000 solution, and they have got a £20,000 goal, that's nothing. That is clearly a guideline. So after that point, funds can be received. Again, it will differ from platform to platform. It's really important to see a realistic goal that the target price for the campaign is aiming for within that 25, 30, 45 day period there. If that goal seems really low, wonder why it's so low. Next, always use a credit card. I appreciate not everyone's got a credit card with that amount of balance, that amount of fluidity, good to go out the gate. And frankly, if you aren't able to have that, maybe that is not money you should be spending on a server on crowdfunding. But if you use a credit card to purchase these things, you have the ability to get that purchase queried with a third party, in this case, the credit card in question. Traditionally, chargeback periods are between 90 to 120 days. If you use Amex, in some cases, you can get it all the way up to 180 days of chargeback. Chargeback effectively means I've paid for a good or service, I have not received the good or service I have purchased, and therefore the credit card company can investigate, and after that investigation there's a possibility you can get that money back based on all the information of that investigation into the crowdfunding project there. But what's really important is the line, and the line between when you paid the money and when you're supposed to receive it. Because a lot of chargebacks, there's been evidence shown online where people have done chargebacks and the chargeback is based on the intended delivery. So case in point, campaign begins in January, you back that project in January. Now in the specifications and the information, it is stated that they are intending fulfillment to begin in July. Now there is plenty of examples I found online where the chargeback has begun from July. It hasn't started from when the pledge was made, but for when the fulfillment, and then your 120, your 180 days extends from there. Now again, it will differ, and a lot of credit card companies have got slightly concerned about this and almost certainly written it into their T&C. But do look into that, because there are credit cards out there, again, region and country specific, etc., will change things, will allow you for that chargeback to seemingly start from the intended fulfillment date, not when you put the money down. Next up, and we mentioned this in a full video on this subject specifically, it really does make a difference on which crowdfunding website they choose to use. There are loads of them these days, but if we focused on the main two, we can look at Kickstarter and we can look at Indiegogo, because these two platforms aren't the same. They're both crowdfunding, but they have very, very different models which appeal to different creators, be they legitimate, intending to deliver, scammers, or those that are hobbyists, or those just trying to put an idea together in the hope they can make it big. Now, the big difference comes down to where and when the line is for money. Now, Kickstarter, that model there, if you do not hit the target raised amount, remember earlier on when I said that 20k figure, if that campaign doesn't hit that number, that money doesn't go to that creator. All the people that backed it get their money back, it's fine. Or in some cases, it's not even deducted. But if it crosses that line, then it goes into the next stage of the campaign where they can look at, with Kickstarter's overview, how much and when those funds drop. In some cases, the funds will just immediately go to the creator to start creating that project. But depending on the campaign and the scale of the campaign, and we saw this in Storaxa, proportions of the money is distributed, and then during certain target goals being met, the rest of the money is delivered. And also the payments can often be handled by a third party like Stripe. The result is there's a lot of layers of authentication, a lot of layers of oversight there. But for that, Kickstarter is a much more expensive platform to create a campaign on, because a lot of the services and features are actually paywalled in the background. You don't get, as a creator of a campaign, the full crowdfunding tools at your disposal. You get a lot of them, but then extra ones, the ones that you see more commonly online, are hidden behind other payment terms. The result is putting a crowdfunding project on Kickstarter, if you want the full Kickstarter bells and whistles from a creator, costs a lot more, and therefore you lose a lot more of the profit margin. Talking of profit margin, it's also worth highlighting that when you do present a project to Kickstarter, you have to have a working prototype, generally photos or video of what you are proposing actually working, also a defined timeline. If you don't provide those things, one of two things can happen. Number one, Kickstarter will flat out reject that campaign being created, or during the course of the early campaign fundraising, if backers raise this with Kickstarter, and again, we've seen it not consistently happening, but we have seen examples online, Kickstarter can step in, investigate, and take down a campaign midway through when it's shown that perhaps what they're proposing isn't a unique bit of IP, but it's really just some AliExpress product with a sticker on top. Now, how does this differ to Indiegogo. And this was something I raised in my video when I said, I don't feel the same about crowdfunding that takes to Indiegogo. The reason being is several. Number one, they introduced something called flexible targets. And ultimately what that means is, if a campaign is slated to once again hit 20k, which again is not a huge amount of money, and it only raises 5k, at the end of that campaign of raising funds, they can have that 5k. They can just keep it. So it doesn't matter if they hit that goal, they can just keep the money. It also changes when the money is taken from backers and held by Indiegogo. But at the same time, on Indiegogo's side, all of the tools are available to you. And unlike Kickstarter, which actually has different rates depending on where you are in the world, on Indiegogo, it's pretty much a flat rate for everything regardless. So a lot of people considering crowdfunding for their project will take to Indiegogo because of the lower bar of entry. Now, lower bar of entry means either that you can get your crowdfunding project started a great deal more cost efficiently, or if you're a scammer, you can then use that low bar to make some change. Also, Indiegogo doesn't require a working prototype to be shown to the same level and with a roadmap as you find on Kickstarter there. The level of investigation by Indiegogo is much lower. Now, I think it's important to highlight, we have seen successful campaigns on Indiegogo. I mean, again, the Zimmer board, Zimmer blade kind of stuff, a lot of those early projects were on Indiegogo, and these are legitimate products now. We've seen other examples too. We've covered it in other videos. And again, I will circle back to what I said about the OpnNAS or OpnNAS. I do think it is a project that beset hurdles, and I don't think the original intention was to scam anyone. I just think it's been poorly managed, and now someone, Eric, I presume, is in over their head right now in terms of what they've had to manage there at the end. Again, that is just my opinion. I have no facts to base on other than the evidence and circumstantial evidence of comments and updates there. But Indiegogo isn't inherently a bad platform compared to Kickstarter. It is just a less regulated and arguably less protective of backer platform as you might find on Kickstarter. And that's really important if you're going to consider any project in crowdfunding between these two platforms. The current status of the OpnNAS right now is not something that's going to make me stop talking about crowdfunding NAS solutions here on the channel, because frankly we've covered enough of these, and we always make a point in our videos of discussing the difference and the risks involved in crowdfunding on solutions like this. But I do hope there are some nuggets from this video that you will take with you if you are considering a crowdfunding NAS solution. And again, I include big and small names, because half the problem with crowdfunding right now is when it used to be an indie startup platform, and now more and more is being used by larger platforms in order to use the marketing and resource tools that are included with those crowdfundings to push your product in a way where they don't want to hire a third-party marketing company or any kind of investigation into different Eastern or Western audiences. Crowdfunding isn't what it was, but I tell you what it isn't, it's not traditional retail. If you can't stand to lose the money, don't back this. It's not about the saving, it's about the loss. And remember, you are backing on crowdfunding as 2 steps behind DLC. You are 2 steps behind, release candidate. You are living in a world of alphas and betas. No, that's what you are paying for. And needless to say, we will be keeping an eye on the OpnNAS. If there's any meaningful updates with regards to fulfillment, I'll let you know either in the comments below, a pinned comment, or in a follow-up video. Remember that only 28 people backed this project, so a lot of you might be thinking, oh, this is small fry in the grand scheme of things, but I think a lot of the salient points of this video can be applied to the majority of crowdfunding projects. But let me know what you guys think. It'd be great to talk about it below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.